3 years ago, Polly thought a bigger paycheck would finally make life feel bigger. The raise came. Then another one. The number on the direct deposit looked impressive. Friends noticed. Co-workers congratulated him. For a few months, Polly genuinely believed he had crossed some invisible line into financial freedom. But something strange happened. His life barely changed. He still checked his bank account before making plans. He still thought twice about taking a long weekend. He still felt the pressure of the mortgage, insurance, groceries, subscriptions, car expenses, and every other bill that seemed to quietly grow whenever his income grew. The strangest part was that Polly wasn't actually bad with money. He wasn't spending thousands of dollars every weekend. He wasn't driving a supercar. He wasn't buying designer clothes every month. He had simply made the mistake millions of people make. He increased his lifestyle at almost exactly the same speed as his income. When Polly earned more, the apartment became a nicer house. When the house became more expensive, the car payment became more expensive. When the car got upgraded, weekends became more expensive. Then came better restaurants, more subscriptions, more convenience, more expensive vacations, and a growing collection of things that felt small individually but became enormous when they all showed up on the same month's credit card statement. Polly was earning more money than he had ever earned before. And somehow, his future still depended on the next paycheck. That was the moment he started asking a different question. Not, how can I earn more, but, what would my life look like if my old salary was enough? That question changed everything. Because the goal wasn't to become cheap. The goal wasn't to live like he was broke, and it definitely wasn't to stop enjoying life. Polly wanted something much more interesting. He wanted to build a life where his old salary could pay for the essentials, while his future income was used to buy freedom instead of bigger obligations. Think about that for a second. Imagine waking up on a Monday knowing your lifestyle doesn't require your highest possible income. Your mortgage is manageable. Your normal bills are covered. Your retirement contributions happen automatically. Your investment account keeps growing, and if your employer suddenly changed your job, you wouldn't immediately panic about how to replace every dollar. That's a very different kind of wealth. It doesn't necessarily look rich from the outside, but it feels rich from the inside. Polly's first move was surprisingly boring. He calculated how much his previous lifestyle actually cost. Not what he wanted to spend. Not what he thought he spent. What he actually spent. He went through 12 months of bank statements and credit card transactions. Housing, utilities, insurance, transportation, food, entertainment, travel, subscriptions, shopping, everything. And then he separated those expenses into 3 groups. The first group was what he called life. Housing, basic food, transportation, insurance, utilities, and other expenses that genuinely supported his everyday life. The second group was comfort. Restaurants, upgrades, convenience purchases, entertainment, nicer hotels, subscriptions, and things that made life more enjoyable. The third group was identity. These were purchases that weren't really about utility. They were about feeling successful. The newer car, the expensive watch, the upgraded neighborhood, the constant restaurant photos, the things that quietly told Polly and everyone around him that he was doing well. That third category surprised him, because when he looked at individual purchases, none of them seemed ridiculous. But together, they were expensive enough to keep him dependent on his current income. And Polly realized something uncomfortable. His salary hadn't trapped him. His required lifestyle had. So he made a rule. He would never again allow every raise to become a permanent monthly expense. That sounds simple. It was anything but simple. The first raise he received after making this decision was almost entirely redirected. Instead of upgrading his house, he increased his automatic investment contribution. Instead of replacing a perfectly functional car, he kept the car and sent the difference toward his financial goals. Instead of treating every bonus like free money, he divided it before it reached his checking account. Some went toward investing. Some went toward future purchases, and some went toward experiences he genuinely cared about. That last part mattered. Polly wasn't trying to build a life he hated. He wanted to enjoy his money. He just wanted to stop spending money on things he didn't actually value. And that distinction became one of the biggest changes in his life. Because there is a huge difference between spending money and buying a life. Polly started asking himself a question before major purchases. Will this make my life better 6 months from now, or will it just make today feel better? Sometimes the answer was today, and he bought it. Other times, the answer was surprisingly unclear, and he waited. Waiting became powerful. A lot of spending decisions feel urgent only because the person making them wants the emotional reward immediately. Give yourself 30 days, and the desire often changes. Polly discovered that many things he thought he needed were actually things he simply wanted to stop thinking about. A newer laptop, a more expensive couch, another subscription, a different car, a bigger television, a premium version of something he barely used. Once he stopped automatically saying yes, money started accumulating almost by accident. But there was another problem. Saving his current salary wasn't enough. Polly knew that if he wanted real freedom, he couldn't rely entirely on cutting expenses. There was a limit to how much he could reduce. He could cancel subscriptions. He could eat out less. He could shop more carefully. But there was no realistic version of his life where he could cut his housing cost to zero or stop paying for groceries. So Polly changed the other side of the equation. He started treating his income as a skill problem. Instead of asking, what job pays more? He asked, what can I become unusually valuable at? That question sent him down a different path. He studied the skills that were actually rewarded in his industry, not the skills that sounded impressive, the skills that produced measurable results. He learned how to communicate more clearly. He became better at analyzing problems. He learned tools that made his work faster. He volunteered for difficult projects. He started documenting the results of his work instead of simply hoping someone noticed. And eventually, his earning power changed. The important part wasn't that Polly suddenly became a millionaire. He didn't. There was no overnight breakthrough. There was no magical side hustle producing $10,000 a month. There was simply a gradual change. His professional value increased. His income increased. But this time, his lifestyle didn't increase with it. That was the breakthrough. Imagine earning an extra $20,000 a year and actually keeping most of the economic benefit of that increase. Not necessarily the entire amount after taxes, but the majority of what would otherwise have disappeared into lifestyle inflation. That's where compounding becomes interesting. Suppose someone invests $15,000 a year and earns an average hypothetical return of 7%. After 10 years, the contributions alone would total $150,000. With compounding, the account could be worth roughly $207,000. After 20 years, the contributions would be $300,000, while the hypothetical account value could approach $615,000. Those numbers are not promises. Markets don't deliver a guaranteed 7% every year. Some years are positive, some years are negative. Taxes, fees, inflation, and actual returns all matter, but the basic lesson is powerful. A higher income becomes dramatically more valuable when you don't immediately convert the increase into permanent expenses. Polly began to understand that every dollar had two possible jobs. It could make his current life slightly more impressive, or it could make his future life more independent, and he wanted more of the second. This changed the way he looked at his paycheck. Before, payday meant permission. Now payday became allocation. Money came in, and before Polly had a chance to spend it emotionally, the important transfers happened automatically. Retirement contributions, investments, savings for known future expenses, bills. Then the remaining money was his spending money. This sounds incredibly ordinary. That's because it is. The most powerful financial systems often look boring from the outside. There was no dramatic budgeting spreadsheet that Polly stared at for 3 hours every night. There was no complicated investment strategy. There was no secret stock tip. The system worked because it removed decisions. If the money intended for long-term goals never sat in his everyday checking account, Polly didn't have to repeatedly demonstrate discipline. The system made the decision for him, and slowly, something else happened. His definition of a good weekend changed. He didn't stop traveling. He didn't stop eating at restaurants. He didn't stop buying things he enjoyed, but he stopped needing every weekend to feel expensive. A walk with his family could be a good Saturday. Cooking dinner could be a good Saturday. Taking a short drive somewhere new could be a good Saturday. A vacation became something he planned for instead of something he put on a credit card and worried about afterward. The house became a place to live rather than a financial status symbol. The car became transportation rather than proof that he was successful. And his free time became more valuable than his stuff. That was the part Polly hadn't expected. He had spent years believing wealth was about having access to more things. Eventually, he realized wealth was also about needing fewer things to feel satisfied. There is a subtle difference. One person might earn $150,000 and feel poor because every part of their lifestyle requires that income. Another person might earn the same amount but structure their life so that a much smaller income could keep the household running. The second person has something incredibly valuable: optionality. Optionality means you have choices. You can leave a bad job. You can take a month off. You can help a family member. You can handle an unexpected repair. You can say no to an opportunity that doesn't make sense. You can spend more time with your children. You can start a business without needing immediate profits to pay every household bill. That is why the lifestyle Polly built didn't look dramatically different at first. The difference was hidden. His financial obligations were growing more slowly than his assets. His income was growing faster than his lifestyle, and the gap between those two numbers was quietly becoming freedom. Then came a moment that made the entire strategy feel real. Polly's company went through a restructuring. For years, he had assumed that losing his job would be financially terrifying. Now it was still uncomfortable, but it wasn't terrifying. He had savings, his investments were growing, his fixed expenses were manageable, and, perhaps most importantly, he knew his skills had market value. He wasn't financially invincible, nobody is, but he had built distance between himself and the edge. That distance is one of the most underrated forms of wealth. You don't see it in a driveway. You don't see it on Instagram. You don't hear about it at dinner parties. But it changes the way you sleep. It changes the way you negotiate. It changes the kind of work you accept. It changes the decisions you make when life gets unpredictable. Polly also discovered something about his friends. Some people assumed he had become more successful because he was spending more. They noticed the nicer vacations. They noticed the house. They noticed that he occasionally bought something expensive. What they didn't notice was that Polly had stopped upgrading everything. He had become selective. That made his lifestyle look better without making his financial life weaker. And that is an important distinction. Luxury doesn't have to mean maximum spending. Sometimes luxury is having enough margin that an unexpected $3,000 expense is an inconvenience instead of a crisis. Sometimes luxury is taking a Tuesday afternoon off because your financial life doesn't require you to monetize every hour. Sometimes luxury is being able to visit your parents without calculating whether the trip will destroy next month's budget. Sometimes luxury is telling your child, "Yes, we can go," because the decision isn't financially dangerous. And sometimes the most luxurious sentence in the world is simply, "We don't have to." Polly's old salary had once represented the ceiling of his life. Now it represented the floor. That psychological shift was enormous. If his income dropped temporarily, he knew how to adjust. If his income increased, he knew where the additional money would go. If an opportunity appeared, he could evaluate it based on whether it was good rather than whether it was financially necessary. He wasn't chasing a number anymore. He was building a system, and the system had 3 parts. Keep the lifestyle you genuinely love. Increase your ability to earn. Invest the difference between what you can earn and what you actually need. Simple doesn't mean easy. It takes patience. It requires resisting social pressure. It requires accepting that some people will look richer than you. And sometimes it requires making a decision that feels strange today because it will make your future dramatically easier. But there is another side to this. Don't turn financial discipline into a competition with yourself. If your income rises, you are allowed to enjoy some of it. If you want a better home and you can comfortably afford it, that can be a great decision. If a newer car genuinely improves your life and fits your financial plan, buy the car. The danger isn't spending money. The danger is making every lifestyle upgrade permanent before you know whether your financial foundation can support it. Polly eventually created a simple rule for major lifestyle upgrades. First, the purchase had to fit inside his normal cash flow. Second, it couldn't interfere with his long-term investing. Third, he had to be able to maintain it even if his income stopped growing for several years. That third rule eliminated a surprising number of purchases, and the purchases that survived the test were usually the ones he actually valued. That's the interesting thing about financial freedom. It doesn't always make you want less. Sometimes it simply makes you more intentional about what you want. Polly still wanted beautiful experiences. He still wanted a comfortable home. He still wanted to travel. He still wanted to give meaningful gifts. He still wanted to enjoy his money. But now those things were choices. They weren't requirements for maintaining an identity, and over several years, that difference compounded. His investments grew. His skills improved. His income increased. His fixed expenses remained relatively controlled. His emergency reserves became stronger. His financial decisions became calmer. And the life he had once thought required a much larger salary gradually became possible on a much smaller one. That is the quiet part of wealth nobody sees. The outside world may think you simply got a better job. Maybe you bought a nicer house. Maybe you started traveling more. Maybe you seem less stressed. But underneath those visible changes is something more important. You created margin, and margin gives you time. Time gives you choices. Choices give you freedom. And freedom is often what people were really trying to buy when they said they wanted more money. So if you're listening to this and your income has increased but you don't feel significantly freer, don't automatically assume you need another raise. Look at the structure of your life. Ask what your current lifestyle actually requires. Ask which expenses genuinely improve your life. Ask which expenses exist mainly because you've gotten used to them. Ask what would happen if your income stayed exactly where it is for the next 5 years. Then ask the opposite question. What if your income grows? Where will that extra money go? If you don't decide in advance, your lifestyle will probably decide for you. The larger house will look reasonable. The newer car will feel affordable. The upgraded vacation will feel deserved. The subscription will seem insignificant. The convenience purchase won't matter, and each individual decision will be easy to justify. Until 5 years later, you realize your income doubled and your freedom barely moved. Polly's story went in the opposite direction. He didn't build freedom by making his life smaller. He built it by making his financial obligations grow slower than his earning power. That gave him something his old salary never could. Space. Space to think. Space to wait. Space to change jobs. Space to help his family, space to take risks, space to say no, and eventually, space to stop measuring every decision against the next paycheck. That is the real transformation. Not looking rich, not impressing people, not reaching some magical number and suddenly becoming happy. It's reaching the point where your lifestyle no longer needs to consume every dollar your best possible career can produce. Your old salary doesn't have to disappear. It can become the foundation. Your future income can become the accelerator. And the gap between the two can quietly purchase the one thing money is most powerful at buying: freedom. So the next time you get a raise, pause before upgrading your life. Before the bigger house, before the nicer car, before the monthly payment. Ask one question: what if I let this raise improve my future instead of only improving my lifestyle? You might still buy the house. You might still take the trip. You might still upgrade the car. But now you'll be making those decisions from a position of strength. And years from now, you may look back and realize something strange. The moment your life really changed wasn't when you started earning dramatically more. It was when you stopped needing dramatically more just to maintain the life you already had. That is how you quietly build a life your old salary couldn't afford.